Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. We're continuing the Before You Say I Do series, and I have my helper, trusted Glenville, who we're talking about some of the things to think about before we say I do. And today, welcome again.
Hey guys, welcome.
Today we're going to do three questions to consider before we say I do. And of course, everything is in the trauma frame. So one of the questions, the first one is expectations.
Mm.
Expectations, like how important it is to talk about expectations. And we were just talking about that before we came on, and some of the expectations that we didn't discuss. Mine came from books, and I think they were unrealistic. So managing expectations is so important, isn't it? Where did your expectations come from?
Um, to be honest with you, my expectations were very minimal, really, because all I wanted it to do, all I was looking for was just a woman that loved God and that loves me. And once she loves God and loves me, then I said, I'll then be by God. God will help me to deal with the other things.
Hmm.
So my expectations, I didn't have great expectations, but all I wanted was just someone that loves God and that loves me.
Mm. And he got both, right? So, but I think how important it is, though, for young people or just people who are considering marriage to think about what do I expect from the next person. Like when I have a student, when I used to do practice teaching, I say, "What do you expect from me?" And I'd ask them what they expected from me, and I would tell them what I expect from them, so that the professional relationship, can function. So I think it's important that that should be discussed before. Like I need these things from you.
Mhm. Oh yeah, of course, of course. These are things. These are primary things that I believe must be discussed. And unfortunately, I wasn't really aware of those things.
And I mean, 18 years in, there's a lot of things we know now that we didn't know then. But I believe that trauma plays a role in whether or not we know what to expect. So what we see modeled as a family in our home, whether or not we can ask for what we need, whether or not we know what we need.
Yeah, trauma plays a strong role in that. I mean, trauma is such a thing that it comes in very different ways and form. You get what I'm saying? So with your dad not being there, with your not having good communication with your mother, with not having good relationship with siblings. You get what I'm saying? So it has its impacts upon the way that you communicate and relate and
Yeah.
expectations of someone else and so forth. So it's almost like you've been limited to learn about expectations because of the different um, deficiencies in the relationship while growing up.
Mm, not having connection, or not seeing anybody model what asking for need looks like.
Yeah,
Like if everybody's just doing things and fixing things and solving problems without communicating it, then you don't know how to naturally, that this is something that I need, unless your eyes is open to it before.
before I mean, this is one of the things why I believe strongly. I'm a strong advocate for that a community is what grows or raise or build helps a child to grow, and praise God that He put a community around me um, where I had a really good friend from high school, but also I had a cousin, an auntie that constantly showing interest and helping me to make certain decisions and so forth. So so when you're deficient in one side, the
Mm.
Lord allows it to come from the other side. You know what I mean? So it's always like the body part. If you have a problem with your left leg, then the right leg is gonna
Sympathize.
sympathize and work to help for that to ease the burden off of that left leg. But eventually, what you're gonna have to recognize is that after you would have actually get the left leg solved and
Mm.
healed, guess what? You're gonna find a problem with the right leg.
Because it had a lot of pressure.
Because it carried a lot of pressure and the burden, and eventually because it started to experience wear and tear. So eventually you're gonna then start have to work with that now. So that's where we are to recognize that in every different deficiency or in every imbalance, you're gonna have to try to really cultivate and look at things and know where you see where you are and work on each side at the same time.
Yeah. If you know that you have deficiencies, and I mean, that's why you're here, and I'm so glad that you're here. So if you know some of the things that might impact our ability to have clear ideas around what we expect. So we might know, but we don't know how to articulate it, or we might not know, but we need it anyway. And so halfway down the road, we realize that, hang on, I need this thing, but I don't have it, or my partner don't have it. And then what do I do? And sometimes we feel like that must be it then. This must be over because we don't have what he doesn't have, what I need, or she doesn't have what I need, or what I expect. So that's the next thing that I want to just to go on to, how important communication is, to have good communication before you say I do, before you go into marriage. Now, what does good communication look like in a relationship where people are dating? What does
Well, one we might think that, oh yeah, we're able to talk on various different topics and look at the different interests and talk about this and talk about that, but we're missing the real meat of this of good communication. Is being able to say, listen, babes, or Han, Joanna, or Glenn, when you said this really hurt my feelings. you know, and then I'm gonna be able to then say, did I hurt her feelings? You recognize, you're responding to what she said, and then you're able to then, having heard her again, it's like he's actually then saying, yeah, oh boy, hon, John, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that this is, and that's where you are being able to acknowledge that she's been hurt, and also acknowledge that you hurt her, but also you are learning what hurts her. So I think that's the communication.
A few things happening at once, isn't it?
That's right.
So you're learning about each other, you're acknowledging hurt, you're doing repair, because that's what the apology does, do repair work. So so my mind is going, that's why sometimes when I stutter, that because so many thoughts are tumbling over in my mind at the same time. Somebody said in a group this morning that I run that safety means love to them, and I think safety means love to me too. And it's only in a relationship that is where you feel emotionally safe that you can say I was hurt. Because if you don't feel emotionally safe, then people who don't feel safe probably won't be vulnerable and say they're hurt. And that helps good communication, isn't it? If I know that I'm safe, if I know that I'm going to be heard, if I know that you're going to apologize for the harm that you've caused, then I feel safe in saying that I was hurt. But if I know that you're not going to apologize, then I might just wrap it up inside and not say it. And so that's why it's important that we have this conversation. So when you're dating, some of the things that you look for before is whether or not you're feeling emotionally safe. Can you be vulnerable with this person?
And that is so important. That's very, very important, because as you communicate, you develop trust, and a relationship without trust is no relationship. A relationship without faith, to have the confidence to know, okay, yes, I know she's gonna hear me, and she's gonna validate my pain, or tell me when I'm wrong, or she's gonna be straight, she's gonna be honest. With those aspects, with those levels of communication, are very vital to a relationship, for it to thrive and to grow and to become a safe environment.
So, I mean, we were talking about communication there, but we touched on conflict, because good communication helps us to manage conflict. And we touched on emotional needs, because if you are safe enough, and vulnerability, and these are all elements, isn't it, that makes
Mhm.
communication really, really effective.
That's right.
So
That's right.
that, and important before you say I do. Uh, As I'm talking, a story came to mind. When we got married, we had this conversation, and I think you initiated the conversation. You said, "We are not going to argue in front of people." You said,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
something to that effect, and I agreed, because it sounded like a good idea
Mhm. Mhm.
until it wasn't, because then there comes a time, we got married in Jamaica, and we agreed that in Jamaica, and I don't remember why you had said it. I'm not a loud person or somebody who argues anyway, but you said it, and I thought it was a fantastic idea. But of course, I got tempted, triggered at the airport, getting back on the airplane to come back to the UK. I didn't do anything, but I just thought, I was so frustrated. But I remembered the agreement that we had, and so I couldn't allow my frustration to 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 just kind of take whatever form it was going to take. And I learned something vital about myself that time, because I thought I was a really calm person who never got frustrated and would never do anything in my frustration, like speak out in my frustration, or attack anybody verbally in my frustration. But I learned that day that I had the potential to do it. But because we had that agreement,
Mhm.
I didn't. I was frustrated. I was hungry. They messed up my order at the restaurant. Everybody got food and I didn't. It was like everything conspired against me. So I got on that airplane and I was just vexed. So I just
Mhm.
didn't speak. so so
Uh,
it was so good though. And that's good communication and agreement around what our relationship is going to look like. So something really important
mhm. Mhm.
to you probably didn't even know I was frustrated.
You know, to be honest with you, she concealed it.
I didn't try to conceal it. I was just mad, and it's best if I didn't speak at that time.
She was quiet. I recognized her quietness, but I didn't realize that she was frustrated.
I didn't. I was hungry.
You know, and you know, listen, if you know her now, you know, it's like when she's hungry, and she's verbalizing it. She let you know now that she's hungry.
I will.
You know
So
what I'm
I've
saying?
learned to use my
So
words, right?
then she was quiet. She didn't say anything then. You know what I'm saying? So here is where, then you begin to, that level of trust, that level of how should I what should I say? Should I say trust? No. Um,
The agreement that we had.
the agreement. She stuck to the covenant. She stuck to the
Yeah.
agreement.
Yeah.
And that's where trust is developed. That's
Mm.
where another level of communication that we take for granted.
Mm.
You know, the 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 the, the ability to recognize to go through something and not violate a covenant,
Yeah.
an agreement. That's a level of communication that is beyond that I believe that we should look for. We should see these things. We should learn to know each other so we can recognize these things. Even through friendships, those can happen through friendship before we go on to the real Mackay, to the courting and so forth,
Yeah.
even with marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's communication. Of course, when we go into the other part of the series, and I'm going to have other people come on and talk about this communication and the before you say I do phase as well. But that is communication is so key, even after. So when we go into the marriage series, we talk about communication some more. But it really is key, being able to say what you need, being able to manage your expectations, being able to manage our feelings. Because I think learning how to manage emotions help us to communicate effectively as well.
Yeah, I believe is that, as we spoke previously, that I believe it's our spiritual connection
It
that
helps.
that 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 empowers us to be able to communicate effectively, confidently, and empathize and sympathize with the other as they communicate, whether they're hurt or whatever they're verbalizing. Okay, and and I and it is so important to have that, you know, as we go through this whole aspect of communication. Because
Mm.
without that spiritual connection, it's it's
It it really does help, doesn't it? Because then,
yes.
because we can pray in those moments of frustration, we can pray, we can, use our strategies, deep breathing, to manage how we feel, so we can understand our stress response. We can know that we get frustrated and what the frustration might look like, and not give anybody responsibility for our frustration. My frustration, because I didn't have something to eat, wasn't anybody's responsibility but my own.
Hmm.
As much as I was mad at the woman at the restaurant for serving everybody and not me, and messing my order up, my frustration was my responsibility. And it because I'm frustrated, it wasn't okay for me to break an agreement. So I had to learn how to manage my own emotions.
Mm.
Um,
And as you speak this, as you say, as you said, being able to manage your own
Emotions.
emotions is also managing your thoughts, because your
Mm,
thoughts and your emotions
yeah.
is what then builds, then brings a character or the personality, and you speak out of your emotions,
Right.
of your thoughts and emotions. And so here is where the connection with God is so vital,
Mm-hmm.
because self will come out when actually you should be working, allowing God to that spiritual connection where God takes over, and to so that love can be seen, love
Yeah.
can be revealed.
Mm,
Okay, because that's the whole idea as we get to the crux of 1 Corinthians 13. Because what better communication that you want than that,
the
those
love of
levels of communication, you
that
know
love that constrains us.
love that constrains us, but more so that love that doesn't behave itself unseemingly.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not puffed up.
Mm,
You
mm,
know,
mm.
it doesn't harbor evil. You know, it doesn't harbor wrongdoings. You know, it 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 believe all things and hope all things. So those are levels of communication that I believe that should be developed through the individuals as they prepare to meet the one that they're gonna be.
You raise an important point, especially in First Corinthians 13, and something that I haven't addressed yet in this series, I don't think. And that is that sometimes there's abuse in dating relationships. And the point that you just raised on First Corinthians 13 really is an important point, because if the love doesn't look like that, then it's not love.
Mm,
I saw a quote that says, perfect, and it's the word of God says, perfect love casts out fear. Therefore, if you're afraid, it's not love.
mm,
If the love doesn't measure up to First Corinthians 13, it's not love, and it will never be love. So believe what you see and make a decision based on that.
mm. And hence and but also let us also recognize that we're all growing in our spiritual relationship in self-discovery.
Mm,
Okay, and so I may have a certain level of understanding, and I love out of that level of understanding, and it may seem that it's not love, but actually it's love to the level of understanding that you have.
sure.
But then you need to grow more to recognize, wow, there's a greater, there's another level on the ladder to climb, to show and demonstrate love and effective communication with
Yeah.
another.
That's true. That's true. But I was talking mostly about like when there is manipulation and control and
Okay.
gaslighting, when they're very clear abusive
Yes.
tactics that is
Tactics.
being used, that means it's not going to measure up to First Corinthians
Yeah.
13. So that's different to the person who is growing. And we can offer grace
Yes.
and room, because we're all growing.
Yeah.
We're all not starting at
Yeah. And bearing in mind, When you start experiencing things like that, there are effective ways of communication with that. Oh, no, no, no. I'm not sticking up with that. You say, listen, I give you time to sort yourself out, and you give space. Get some, you know, and so that the individual can work on themselves. You don't stay in line. Don't stay in there and think, oh, I love him. I love her, and you stick up with that kind of behavior. You get what I'm saying?
It's
You
a no.
you can love the person effectively and strongly, but setting boundaries in place, putting boundaries, those are ways of communication as well, to let them know, listen, okay, you have some things that you need to sort out, and I'm going to love you from a distance, or I'm going to love you by giving you the space to do what you need to, because I can't,
Yeah.
you know.
You can't love somebody enough to let them change. They have to want to change in order for that to happen.
That's right.
So I'm really glad that you raised that. So the last one we want to look at is families of origin,
Mhm.
because we take with us what we learn in our families of origin. And
Mhm.
so when you are going to date somebody, or before you say I do, it's really important for us to know families of origin. So you knew you knew my sisters. I didn't know your family until I went to the Caribbean and met people, but and was content. But it's really important for us to know, because we're individuals, and especially like the world is the way it is. You might meet somebody in another country and you've not met their family, and so you don't know what the dynamic is like. You don't know what the family dynamics are. You don't know what the generational things look like. You don't know. Um, the interaction between them and parents and the relationship and all of those things, they matter. They really matter. So even though people might have good boundaries and live away from families and maybe not have no contact, it still matters, because in times of stress we resort to what we know. Like, we're going to be our parents at some point, until we understand that, whoa, I don't want to be my parents, and we make different choices and go down a different path.
I remember that I there was one thing that was that I was holding at the back of my head, was because my dad left when I was 5, and I didn't go with him, and uh, and so I wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be like my dad, you know. And I decided I'm gonna go for whatever hard times, whatever difficulties I have to go through with my children next by my side. And I tried so hard not to be like him, so much that when Joanna invited him over, Joanna said I was almost the embodiment of him.
That's DNA, isn't it? So,
You know,
so
so he's like, here was it that
it
my,
wasn't a bad thing,
you know,
luckily.
you know,
So-
so so I was laid back like him. I was easygoing like him. You know, um, I was probably stubborn like him too. You know, and but then it's interesting, that it's so important that we come to understand that these historical um,
yeah.
traits and personalities and so forth, that we can then learn to realize, and that we can start praying and asking
Mm,
God to help to mold and put these
hmm.
things into check, you know. Um, or if it's, then just take me to the crucible so these can be burned away. You know what I'm saying? So that by the time you reach this woman, by the time you reach this man, you know, you're the perfect individual for that person, or you'll never be that perfect individual, because there'll be so much things as long
Just
as
for
you're
where you
living.
are,
But just that's right,
just for where you are in
just
the
for you
journey.
are in the journey. Like, for example, Moses. Do you think that Moses was perfectly ready to lead the people of God? No, he wasn't perfectly ready to lead the people of God. But God saw that he was at a point where he was ready to use him,
Mm.
you know. And so, it's the same thing for us, Um, God will see that we are at a point where we're ready for the relationship to get to the next level of development. of
Yeah.
growth and communicate in another level, on another spiritual level. Grow spiritually, growing physically, mentally, and emotionally.
You talked about praying when we meet people
Mm,
and when we see certain things, or praying for them before, or praying against generational patterns, and
mm,
praying against generational cycles, because who they are is who they are. the 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 things that is in the generation above them is going to come with them. And so it's really important to be aware of that. The things
mhm.
that is into generation above you will come with you as well, because it didn't start with you. And that's an amazing book that maybe consider reading before. Like, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Woolen, and there is When the Past Becomes Present, and I've forgotten the name of the author for that one now. And there's also Loving with the Brain in Mind. And those books really gives us understanding of ourselves and of the people that we have in our lives as romantic partners, because it helps us have understanding, it helps us offer grace, but it helps us see ourselves, and it helps us also make different choices. There is a beautiful promise in the commandments that we read. Was it this morning that we read it, or a couple mornings ago? That one,
I
that
think it, I think it was yesterday morning.
yesterday morning, about the sins of the fathers not visiting.
Actually, this morning, actually.
Yeah, it gives me really real hope around generational patterns, because the sins of the fathers will not visit the third and fourth generation of them that
Love me.
love me and keep my commandments. And so that's the safeguard that we have. While we're not going to ignore them, we're going to know that our hope is in it will not, that's a promise,
Mhm.
that it will not visit. So if you see anything that you're worried about, that you think might come down to the generation. So we know about physical things. We know about physical things like uh,
Physical diseases and
diseases and
illnesses.
stuff that has the potential, but we never think about like patterns of behavior
Mhm.
that might be problematic
Yeah.
for how that might those patterns of behavior might show up in a relationship that might cause problems.
Yeah, it's the same way that that disease, the disease, it can be DNA, can go for the DNA.
Yeah,
Same thing with with behaviors, and
absolutely.
you know, because it's interesting that the people say, "Oh, they, why do you behave just like your dad? Why do you talk just like your aunt? Why do you respond the way that you respond like your grandma or your great granddad?" It's where I'm coming from, and these things are basically DNA, you know, and you can you imagine that the work that you're going to be seeking to do in developing yourself to communicate to communicate the way that God communicates is to be able to see God and for God to make those changes. So in all the time that we think that I believe that we are corresponding here or we are dialoguing or talking about is all about allowing God, the spiritual connection, to
Underpins it.
break all those other connections,
Yeah.
you know, to make each one of us, to prepare us individually and collectively
Mm.
for each other.
And I think, therapy is a good thing. It's a really good
Yeah.
tool in helping us to understand ourselves, and in order for us to understand ourselves, understand what didn't start with us but we're repeating. It helps us to see ourselves. Healing is self-discovery. So it helps you to discover yourself, so that you know the self that you're meeting, that you're presenting to somebody else, to
Mhm.
to as you're forming a relationship.
Yes, yes. And I like to, I like, bear with me here because I like to make these spiritual connections, because here is it that, you know, oftentimes we communicate that we have, that we don't, sometimes we don't recognize that we are communicating that we don't really love ourselves, you know, and we want to love the other individual.
Oh, that's good. But you don't love yourself, but you want to love somebody else.
That's right.
And I wonder if you can love anybody if you don't love yourself.
That's right. But I want to bring this blessed, this really lovely assurance in that the very fact that you can allow yourself to go into a connection, a spiritual connection with God, okay? The very fact that you're making these steps towards a connection with God, you are actually loving yourself, okay? And that's the very grassroots, that's the very foundation of preparing yourself to be able to have the effective communication, to show that kind of love, to show that care, that trust, you know, because you're starting it off. And interesting that I never knew all of that, you know, and so oftentimes we don't know it. It's almost like taboo. But the first step is loving God, going after God is the first step of self-love.
Mm.
And then God will then help you to either go through counseling, to go through counseling, go through, and there's this self-discovery about, and the family discovery about trauma and learning and developing.
He shows us ourselves.
It shows us ourselves so that we can then recognize our need for Him, and recognizing our need for Him and going after Him too, so that He can take care of us. It's showing that we love ourselves, and then we're gonna then want to love the other individuals,
Mm.
you know, so that they can, so we can point them to first. Let's do this first level of our loving God, connecting with God, and then the growth can continue.
I think that's a really good point for us to end this episode on. So thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. And we'll be back tomorrow and the next day with more Before You Say I Do series. Also, we're inviting you to our trauma recovery conference June 16 to 18, where we're going to do some more of this at in a deeper way. You can use the details below this video or in the show notes of the podcast to email me to get the application form for the conference. We still have space, but the deadline is fast approaching. So thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join us in the next story.